Welcome to Backyard Cigars. Once again, we're going to go down some history on the cigar, and then we're going to talk about the flavor notes. So, this is none other than Sosa Classic Piramide number 2. Piramide being the Vitola shape. And this is a particular cigar that I believe was released in the 1980s. The Sosa line, so let's start from the beginning. The family started off in Cuba. They had the Santa Julia farm in Cuba. They were one of the largest, the Sosa family was. And they were flourishing and doing very well. And then came Fidel Castro. So they picked off, like a lot of people, they left and they went to Miami. And they stayed in Miami for a while. Sometime in the 70s, though, they created the Sosa line. I think it was late 70s, right? They left Miami with the Quesada family to go to the Dominican Republic in the early 80s. And I think that somewhere in the mid to late 80s, this cigar was created. Correct me if I'm wrong. In 1988, this cigar became the first non-Cuban cigar to get a 93 rating from Cigar Aficionado. You've got to remember, this is 1988, and Cigar Aficionado is really just driven by its love and admiration of Cuban cigars, and Dominican cigars, as well as Nicaraguan cigars, have not developed or reached the level which they're at now in comparison to their Cuban counterparts during that time. So they go to the Dominican Republic with the Quesada family, but eventually they hook up with the Fuente family in terms of the production. Juan B. Sosa is the master blender that was behind the Sosa line, the Sosa cigars. And they had a lot of successful cigars along the way. And of course, like I said, they were using Fuente tobacco. And it was being rolled at the Fuente, Tabacalera Fuente, number 4. And then at that point, R.B. Sosa, Juan B. Sosa's son, was also blending a few cigars himself. And they were doing quite well. And in 2015, he did an interview where he talked about the pride of the family, the pride they take in their 50 plus years making cigars, and how proud they are, of course, of their Cuban heritage and what they bring to the table in terms of making a fine cigar, which they did. But this cigar here that I'm holding is not blended by Juan B. Sosa. No, it's not. And unfortunately, the Sosa line, the Sosa brands, were purchased by AJ Fernandez in 2000, I think either 16 or 17. So in 2015, Arby's talking about the blend recipe for this cigar. And he's talking about how it's not the same. It's more or less the same as it was when it landed in the top 25 in 1988 and got the 93 rating. But that along the years, as the cigar palates have changed and wanted stronger cigars, they've tweaked it. So the original blend was an Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper, a Honduran binder, and Dominican filler. 6.5 by 54 ring gauge Piramide Vitola. But Arby said, yeah, we tweaked it along the way. And this was in 2015 that he said that. Now, like I said, in 2016 17, AJ Fernandez sat down with the family, smoked many cigars, had a lot of cups of coffee, and they hashed out a deal that would be good for both of them. And so AJ pretty much agreed to keep most of the flagship classic blends as they were, but there would be differences. Difference number one is that cigar production for the Sosa lines would cease in the Dominican Republic and pick up in Nicaragua. No more Fuente tobacco. Now they were going to be using tobaccos from AJ's sources. A lawyer for the Sosa family pointed out that although the blends would be remaining the same in terms of, yeah, it's going to be an Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper, Honduran binder, certain things would be tweaked in other lines, and AJ was going to use his special curing process for some of the tobaccos that were going to be used in the lines. So it just goes to show you can keep the blends the same. In terms of on paper, you see Ecuadorian Sumatra, Honduran, Dominican filler, but the grade of the tobacco being used is going to be different. Does it mean it's going to be better? Because you figure you're going from Fuente Dominican tobacco to whatever AJ is going to use, and we know AJ makes great stuff and sources great tobacco and has his own outlets and farms. But is it going to be better or worse? I don't think that this is one of those cases where it's better or worse. I think it's just going to be good all around, right? For the companies, and we as the cigar smokers are going to get to experience a beloved cigar in a different format, perhaps, or in a different interpretation of it, if I can say that, because AJ is going to put his own spin on it, and AJ has high hopes, has had high hopes for these lines since he purchased them. He should, if he wants to make some money off of them. I mean, you purchase a line, right? That's what you got to do. It's like picking up that penny and shining it up. Not that this, maybe that's a bad analogy. Not that this was a dirty penny. It wasn't. It wasn't at all. But let's face it. When you hear the name AJ Fernandez and you're familiar with how everything he touches turns to gold, you kind of hope that this is going to be the case for these lines as well. Well, I've had the original Sosa pre-AJ, and I'm having it now. This is, AJ Fernandez. If I can make some mental notes along the way from what I remember of the original, I will. But it's been a while, so I may not be so sharp on that, so forgive me. But I will do my best. I can tell you this is a nice, slightly veiny, oily wrap, Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper. Beautifully constructed. The original Sosas that were under the care of the Fuente family and the Sosa family were creamy and woody. That's what I remember. Creamy and woody. Not much pepper. This, I'm getting a little spice. I'm getting a little cream. But I'm still getting that woody flavor. It's very prominent. I'm still getting it. And the cream is there. Maybe a little less intense on the cream. In some minor hints of a spice, that come and go. And I'm only in the first inch, guys. So let's see what happens. Look, folks, so far, I mean, you can see how it's holding its ash, and it isn't stifling the cigar in one bit. The flavors have remained pretty consistent with the woodsy notes and the light spices that are a big part of the profile, and you get some of that creaminess, which is expected in this cigar. It's something that a lot of people enjoyed in this cigar. I know a lot of people are thinking that cigar is old, man. Like, you're reviewing an old cigar, but not really, not so much, because AJ took over sometime in 2017, and so these cigars are under his watch now, going on for about 4 years. So that's it's not yesterday, but this is definitely a new chapter for these lines, and I think that the cigar has remained more or less the same. Perhaps some of his techniques in the curing process might help in some ways I couldn't explain to you how, because I'm not AJ Fernandez. I'm not a master like he is, and I'm sure he wouldn't be willing to spill his secrets to anyone about his secret techniques in the processing of the tobacco. I doubt that highly. I wouldn't expect that. It's like, yeah, sure, let me tell you about my secret process. I'll tell you how it improved the cigar. Not gonna happen, but that's okay, because the cigar it still maintains those qualities that I remember and enjoyed when I smoked the Sosa Classic number 2 Piramide many years ago. And I think that's important to keep that tradition going. I mean, we've all heard the cliche, if it ain't broke, I think this is part of it. Is AJ probably saw something that doesn't really need much tweaking, doesn't really need much alteration, just needs to be enjoyed. And if you can improve certain aspects of the process in making the cigar, then so be it. AJ's gonna find a way to do it. But yeah, fine cigar so far. Fine cigar, great aroma, great draw. No issue with the draw whatsoever. It has been just right. I don't want to say perfect, but close to it. Apart from the band, the beautiful band that it has, and the great construction and the beautiful look to the cigar itself, this nice Ecuadorian Sumatran wrapper with the Honduran binder and the Dominican filler. Look, this is in many ways a very classic cigar, a must try for a lot of folks, especially people who are starting off and trying different things, or are new to the cigar world, or even if you're just an old timer that wants to smoke a piece of history. You got to remember, folks, 1988, nobody was talking about non-Cuban cigars as the next great thing. I mean, maybe there were some folks who were very optimistic and very confident in what the future held for both Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic, as well as Honduras. But what I'm saying is, in 1988, a lot of the publications, specifically Cigar Aficionado, they were thinking Cuba, and for good reason, because at that time, that was the epitome of excellence in cigar making, in a great cigar. And it wasn't till much later on that we started seeing, in the 90s with the cigar boom, that we started really seeing the explosion of Nicaraguan and Dominican cigars. And not to say that they didn't have success in the 80s, because they certainly did. They even had success in the mid to late 70s, but it was just not on the same level as Cuba. And for a cigar like this to just break through and get a 93 rating, and I often say that these ratings are not for us, they are for the cigar makers, but very relevant to what I'm saying, to award the company and its cigar, this specific cigar line, with that rating, and give it that nod of approval and recognition, was a sign of promise that opened everybody's eyes. Everybody started talking about that and saying to themselves, if Sosa can do it, why can't we? And if he can do it with Dominican tobacco, why can't we? And you better believe that the Fuente family and the Quesada family and a lot of the other families that were in the Dominican Republic, or the few families that were already starting to look at Nicaragua as a potential replacement for Cuban soil, if you want to say that, it got a lot of people talking and excited about the promise of the future in these regions for tobacco growing, and just making something like this that would get people's attention, not just cigar aficionados, but the American and the global palate in general would gravitate towards this. Who would have thought, right? But there were some people that did have the foresight and did have that ambition and stuck it out through the free zone, through the turbulent times in Nicaragua and Honduras, and they got to see it. They got to see this promised land come to be. So in that, it is a very historical cigar to me. Perhaps someone might say it's just an okay cigar. It's just because, yeah, it's a good cigar. It's a very good cigar. It's very classically done, and it's very solid in construction and flavors. I mean, look, the baking spices with the woodsy notes, some sweetness, creaminess. A little less cream on this one than when I had it under the Sosa, but still a good amount of cream. Now, I've had this cigar for about 3 months in the humidor at about 67, 68 RH, and I'm enjoying the experience, and I hope that if you get a chance to try this, or if you've already had it, that you will enjoy it as well. Thank you for watching. Until next time on Backyard Cigars.